Hello everybody, my name is Louise Savage of Louise Savage Muses. Welcome if you are visiting my site for the first time, my channel, and a warm welcome back too if you have visited before. So I feel really guilty because I can't remember who I heard about Shorty September from, but it's a reading challenge, and the idea is that through September you read shorter books. I think the sort of official definition is anything 200 pages or less. Of course, it depends on the edition, doesn't it? But I thought it was a really interesting idea because my reading appetite always picks up in September. I don't know whether it's something to do with the teaching calendar and the idea of going back to work makes me want to read more because I know I can't. Or whether it's the sort of the onset of autumn, the nights drawing in, maybe having a bit more time to read because I'm not out in the garden so much. But I do associate this time of year with curling up with a good book, definitely. And also at this time of year, I think my genres become more diverse. I tend to read a lot of historical fiction and lighter fiction maybe over the summer. And then the winter comes and I sort of want a bit of suspense or a bit of, I don't know, a bit of ghost stories or something just a little bit different. So I really like the idea of flitting between lots of short books. And I'm not going to commit myself to reading short novels throughout September because there are one or two books that I'm really desperate to get to. But I did start the month with, because of this challenge, by reading Nadeem Aslam, who is one of my absolute favourite authors. This was his debut novel, and I hadn't read it yet. Read most of his others, and much shorter than his other novels too. And it's called Songs of the Rainbirds. And I thought this was an absolutely divine book. His writing, I mean, it's his first novel, but his writing is so subtle. And he writes, he's of Pakistani. Well, he is Pakistani, but lives in the UK now. I think he came over here when he was a teenager. And he doesn't publish his books very often. He spends years and years crafting his novels. And you can kind of really tell because of the quality. And in this particular book, there's a whole cast of characters. There's a list at the beginning like you get in a play. It starts, one of the local dignitaries has been murdered. There's a big mystery around that. And it's set in Pakistan, in a small town. And also there was a train that was derailed nearly 20 years before the novel opens. And 2 bags of mail went missing. And so it's nearly 20 years later and these bags of mail have turned up, and the sort of consequences for the people in the town become really, really apparent, that this mail is kind of exposed. So, yeah, I just loved it. And there's the Muslim priest, there's the chief of police, there's, because obviously they're having to investigate this murder. And a whole cast of characters, a former prostitute, you name it, all life is in this novel. But the way he writes about the monsoon and the onset of the monsoon and the setting, and there are these water lizards everywhere. It's a novel about morality and corruption and also the consequences of partition on the people of Pakistan. So I don't think you can go far wrong, if I'm honest, with Nadeem Aslam. There we go, that's a rave. So then I thought I'd talk to you about 3 short books that I'm hoping to read in September. Whether we'll actually get round to it, I'm hoping I will. I'm having a good reading month so far. So the first one is Dorothy Parker, because I thought I might like a belly laugh, and I absolutely love her writing. She's so witty. This is a collection of her short stories called Big Blonde. And aren't these editions absolutely beautiful? I think, are they Penguin? Yeah, they are. Penguin Classics, designed I think by Coralie Bickford Smith. And I just love the feel of the book. I mean, I shall enjoy just opening it and turning the pages. But yeah, lovely short story collection that I'm hoping to get to. Then there's a novel that I bought not long ago called Histories by Sam Guglani, and this is a story about the NHS. And I think it follows kind of a week in the lives of the NHS and sort of deaths and illnesses and blah, blah, blah. So I think blah, blah, blah sounds really dismissive, doesn't it, when I think of the subject matter, but that's not really what I mean. So we witness insecurities in junior doctors, enraged chaplains. Yeah, it just sounds like a really interesting look into the life of the NHS. This book, Simon Savage, my son, bought me. I'm trying to think whether it was last year or the year before. I think it might have been the year before. We had a wonderful trip to Edinburgh in October together, and we went to Topping's bookshop, and he very kindly, he is lovely, generous, and he bought a copy of this for himself and one for me, and this is a signed first edition. So it's Denise Mina's Rizzio. Rizzio was, I think, allegedly a lover of Mary Queen of Scots and was very violently murdered. And this novella tells that story. So I think it's really gritty. And he was reading it while we were in Edinburgh and absolutely loved it. And I, to my shame, 2 years later, have still not got around to reading it. So I think that's going to be a wonderful one to curl up with, probably this weekend. And then I picked 6 recommendations, 6 books that I've already read myself. Some of them, well, there's a real mixture here. I'll see what you think. So I started with, I haven't banged on about this book for quite a while, so I thought I would bang on about it because I know I've got some new subscribers these days. So I loved this book. It was shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction about 4 or 5 years ago. It's My Sister, the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. I also adore Oyinkan Braithwaite. She's such a wonderful, fresh talent. She's Nigerian, and this novel does what it says on the tin. It starts with a phone call and one sister is ringing the other sister and saying, I've done it again. And the sister that she's phoning just so happens to be a nurse. That's quite handy, isn't it, if you want to clean up and conceal a dead body. So it's just, it starts in this very sort of wacky, I was hooked from the moment I started reading it. It's a very, very quick read and very powerful, because actually the relationship between the sisters and also what they've experienced growing up as children and their relationship with the mother and father become really, really important during the novel. There's also a love interest in one of the doctors in the hospital, which becomes very interesting. So this captivated me, this book, and I absolutely love the cover. I don't know if you can see the reflection in her glasses there, but you've actually got 2 daggers. I'll superimpose her face over mine, see if that helps. There we go. Very, very different novel or novella is The Pearl by John Steinbeck. I read this as a teenager. It was one of the few books that I read at school that my teachers didn't put me off, which is a bit of a awful admission, isn't it? But this is the story of a young pearl fisherman and his wife and his baby Coyotito. What a wonderful name. Coyotito's bitten by a scorpion. They can't afford, they take the baby to the doctor. It's probably going to die. They can't afford the doctor's fees. The doctor won't treat them. And then it just so happens that the following, well, it might be later that day, because I think maybe the action of the story takes place over 24 hours, I've got a feeling. It's a long time since I read it. I ought to reread it now. And he finds a pearl the size of a pigeon's egg, and of course then is able to afford the treatment. But then there's lots of predatory members of society, particularly the doctor and the priest, and I think it's a businessman, who want to take advantage of the family. So I mean, I can still remember the description of this scorpion inching its way towards the child, and I think I was probably about 13 or 14 when I had this read to me, and I have reread it since, but not recently. Beautiful. And the other Steinbeck, I mean, obviously Mice and Men's very famous, but the other Steinbeck novella that I would absolutely, it's a beautiful, beautiful book, is a book called The Moon is Down. You don't hear it talked about very much, but it's about It's set in the Second World War, and it's about the invasion of a small Scandinavian town, and it's just stunning, beautiful. Again, long overdue for me to read that again. I also pulled off my shelf Graham Greene, The Third Man. This book was written, actually, he was kind of rehearsing to write the screenplay for the famous film of that name starring Orson Welles. And the famous character is Orson Welles' character, Harry Lime, who actually has been murdered at the start of the novel. And his friend has come over from America to see him, but finds out that he's been killed. And he goes to the funeral and meets Harry Lime's girlfriend, who's an actress. And they both become very suspicious about what's happened, because he's supposed to have been knocked over by a car. And the accounts vary. Somebody says it's one man who drags his body across, somebody says it's two, and then there's someone who mentions that there was a third man. And so it's kind of their attempt to sort of track down and find out what really happened to Harry Lime. And it's all enhanced by the fact that it's set in Vienna. It's just post the Second World War. It's really, I mean, the film is incredibly atmospheric, but so is this version. And again, I read this when I was really young, and it stayed with me. Another novelist who seems to have sort of slipped off people's radars, and I devoured Brian Moore's books in my late 20s, early 30s. And again, I haven't picked up a Brian Moore novel for a long time, and I think there are some still that I haven't read. So Brian Moore was from Northern Ireland but emigrated to Canada, and I think he wrote this book in the mid-50s, and it did eventually become a very famous film with Maggie Smith and Bob Hoskins. The Lonely Passion of Judith Hearne. I just love the title, and it tells the story of an Irish Catholic spinster who makes her money from teaching piano lessons, and her pupils are dropping off, and she sort of reaches very straitened times, and so she has to leave her home and go and take a room in a rooming house. And there she meets the widowed brother of the landlady, who notices that she's got some rather nice jewellery and thinks that she's wealthy. And then this relationship, in inverted commas, develops between the two of them. And there's a real kind of mixture of reality and fantasy. And again, talking about it, in fact, what I'll probably do is listen to these on Audible, because I just feel like I want to get back into the world of these novels that I haven't read for many, many years. But Brian Moore, honestly, all the novels that I've read of his, and I've read a fair few, again, they're all quite brief, and just wonderful characterization, really thoughtful, lots of interesting themes. So yeah, I recommend this very highly. Another one on my short novel list would be Tin Man, by Sarah Winman. Again, I read this when it first came out. It doesn't seem to be talked about as much now, but just a super. I mean, it says on the back it's exquisite. Haven't been moved so much. Her best novel yet. Her novel Still Life has done really well. Oh, just noticed a little note in the front, and it's a relationship story, really. It's a novel about the relationship between. It says here, it begins with a painting won in a raffle, 15 sunflowers hung on the wall by a woman who believes that men and boys are capable of beautiful things. And there are two boys, Ellis and Michael, who are inseparable, and the boys become men. And then Annie walks into their lives, and it changes nothing and everything. So it's about, sexuality. It's about relationships. It's about childhood love. It's about adult love. It's just an exquisite, as the thing on the back says, beautifully written insight into relationships in the world we live in. And then finally, Letters from Constance by Mary Hocking. I think I first heard bits of this on the radio, I'm not sure. But it is written in in letter form. It's what we call an epistolary novel, I'll have you know, because an epistle, of course, is a letter. And basically it's about two young, well, they were young women who became friends when they were young, and they decide to continue writing. So the letters chart their lives, and they're just beautiful. There's a lot of poignancy. There's lots of day-to-day, very mundane detail in this novel. But you really get to know them, and you really get to know their friendship. And this is something that I really, really valued when I read it. It's set in the 1930s, or at least they start writing letters in the 1930s when they finish school. Mary Hocking was born in 1929. I'm trying to work out when I think it was published. Oh, 1991. There we are. I might have thought it was older than that. So yeah, that would explain it, because that's probably around when I read it, I think, in the early 90s. Yeah, Letters from Constance are really touching. What does it say? Beautifully done, a genuine pleasure to read. That's a quote from Anita Bruckner, and I have to confess I'm not a massive Anita Bruckner fan, but I agree with her on this one. So there we go. Shorty September. Who knew it was a thing? And what a delightful thing. Well, I have to confess that I'm off to the dentist now. Oh, I hope all's well in here. But it's been a pleasure talking to you all again, and I'd love to know what short books or novellas you would recommend for Shorty September. I haven't looked at the prompts. I really ought. Oh no, actually that's a fib. I did have they're quite easy to find online, and I did have a very quick glance, and I thought it would have been, maybe next year I should do it properly and actually try and do the prompts, because there were some quite nice things in there. Anyway, take care, everybody. Hopefully I'll be rambling away to you at some point next week. We shall see. Take care. Bye. Well, was that backwards? Bye? Bye? I don't know. Anyway, bye.